I've always been afraid of our garbage disposal. But I trusted my wife. My wife has insomnia and does chores when she can't sleep. It's been that way for so long that I've stopped noticing. Usually I don't even wake up. But a few nights in a row, she started running the garbage disposal a lot, off and on through the night, sometimes for a minute or two. Of course I couldn't sleep through that. So late one night I went downstairs to check on her. She was in her PJs and bent over the sink, staring into the drain. She was leaning in so close that some of her hair had piled up in the bottom of the sink. "You lose something?" I asked. She gasped and snapped up when she heard me. "You scared me," she said. She did look jumpy, which made me uneasy too. I saw that she was holding something and asked her what it was. "Nothing, a slice of turkey," she said, guilty. She had balled it up into a gray-pink blob from squeezing it so hard. "That doesn't go in the garbage disposal," I said. I didn't know what else to say. "Right," she said. "Sorry. I'm half asleep." She dropped it into the trash under the sink. There was a pack of sliced turkey on the counter, already half-eaten. Why did we have it? I was the one who ate lunch meat. But I hated turkey. I didn't remember telling her to pick up any. "Hungry?" she asked. She had seen where I was looking. "No," I said. My body had gone cold. Something felt seriously wrong here. She nonchalantly turned around and put the lunch meat back in the fridge. Then, with her back still facing me, she said, "Actually, I did lose something in the sink. A gemstone stone in my ring." She turned around and shrugged. "I'm an idiot. Sorry. Which did you lose?" I asked, trying to sound nice. I had never talked to her while she was in one of her insomnia spells. It was more like she was sleepwalking. Or as if I were talking to a stranger, a woman who only looked like my wife and had wandered into my house. "A little one here," she said, pointing at her ring. "You wouldn't have noticed it. It's really small. You can barely even see where it's supposed to go." I doubted that I wouldn't have noticed it. I had bought her the ring, but the kitchen was too dark for me to see clearly. "You want me to fish it out for you?" I said. She smiled. "Sure," I said, going over to the sink. I felt a sudden panicked urge to run back upstairs. But I pushed that feeling down. I loved my wife. I trusted her, even when she was maybe half lying. I reached my hand inside the drain. It was damp and warmer in there than I had expected. The bumpy edge of the blade was almost hot. The metal must have heated up from the garbage disposal running for so long. "It's really small," she said. She came over to watch and leaned against the wall. The switch for the garbage disposal was next to her shoulder. I almost told her to be careful, but didn't. I didn't want to seem controlling. She smiled again at me. I poked around the sides of the garbage disposal container, everything I touched soggy and soft, old scraps of food. The container felt like it was made of rubber. I had thought it would be metal or hard plastic, but the sides gave slightly when I pushed. And they were strangely warm. My wife was watching me intensely, her shoulder now on the edge of the light switch panel. My finger brushed something hard, and she moved her arm, the arm that was on the switch, and I ripped my hand out of the drain. "What?" she asked. "Did you cut yourself?" "I'm fine," I managed to say. My voice was shaking. Was she really going to flip the switch? "You are?" she asked. "Yes. I'm fine. I couldn't find anything. Sorry." "That's okay," she said, yawning. She went back up to bed. She moved slowly, oblivious to her surroundings. Maybe she was sleepwalking. I followed her upstairs and found her already asleep. I couldn't make myself get into bed with her. None of it had made any sense, her running the disposal, the meat, her lie about the ring. So I snuck back downstairs. The sink looked the same as before, a few drops of water around the rim, a waxy smear of grease on the stainless steel. I put my hands on either side of the drain and stared into the black hole. There was nothing unusual about it, other than the vague threat of something sharp hiding out of sight in the dark. But then I heard a low, soft gurgling sound in the drain. I bent over and lowered my ear to the drain to listen better. Maybe it was water moving through the pipes. But this sounded more organic, like the gurgling sound a baby might make. And I realized that my ear felt warm. Warm air was wafting out of the drain every few seconds, as if the hole were breathing. I pulled away from the sink. Nothing came chasing after me. Just to see what would happen, I got out a slice of turkey and pushed it down into the drain with my finger. As soon as the meat had slipped past the drain flaps, the garbage disposal roared to life. The metallic grinding noise rattled through the house. I probably screamed, but I couldn't hear anything over the harsh, weight-grating sound. Finally it stopped. My heart pounding, I took all the turkey that was left and dropped it on the drain, then got a wooden spoon and pushed it down into the hole. The garbage disposal turned back on again and I ripped the spoon out. The end was gnawed to splinters. I'm not sure how long I stood there, watching the drain and listening to the blade chew up the meat. A minute, maybe. Then the faucet was running too. My wife was there. She had come down without me noticing. The water gushed loudly into the drain and choked down the pipes. The garbage disposal soon stopped, and she turned off the water. The water helps the food go down, she explained. I was too stunned to move, and she grabbed me by the arms, talking so quickly I couldn't get a word in. It had started a few nights ago, when she had fed the drain some crumbs from the counter. Then she fed it more, and noticed that it liked meat. So she got more meat. Whatever it was, the thing down in the drain, whatever it was doing, growing, nesting, it was getting more active because of the food. And that meant it was getting hungrier, which meant more food. She apologized for putting so many groceries on the card. But it had been worth it. She had tamed the thing. That's why I knew you'd be safe earlier, she said. I'll show you. She got a bag of sugar out of the pantry, wet her hand under the faucet, and dunked it into the bag. She pulled her hand out and it was completely covered in sugar. Then she stuck her hand down the drain. Stop! I screamed. She pulled her hand back out. It was perfectly fine and perfectly clean, not a speck of sugar left. See, she said. He won't bite. And it feels good. She sugared up her hand again and stuck it back in the drain. It kind of tickles. And it's so warm. I couldn't speak. You want to try? She asked. And she got my hand wet under the faucet too, and dunked it into the sugar. I let her. I was curious, honestly, more curious than afraid. And then my hand went into the drain. There was a loud, sickening crunch. I remember that. But I don't remember anything after, or even how the pain, the adrenaline and shock blocked everything out. I must have somehow tied a tourniquet on and called an ambulance. It's funny. I close my eyes and I can't even picture the stump. It's still wrapped up. Or the blood. There must have been lots of blood, but it's all cleaned up now and I can't picture any of it. Nobody could find the hand anywhere. Nobody can find my wife either. She took the cash, the jewelry, the second car. All of it mine. The cops put out an alert for the car. I don't know. It's all so screwed up. Today I had a plumber come by to check out the garbage disposal. He had never seen anything like it. The shredder and motor were never installed. It's basically an empty container sitting under the drain. And you said it was working? He asked, doubtful. Yeah, I told him. My wife used it for years. I love my family during the day. I can't love them at night. I woke up this morning to a dead body in my kitchen. I told my parents about it, and along with my younger sibling, we cleaned up the mess. The blood was everywhere, and so were discarded pieces of her. My cousin was dead, and when all was said and done, it was clear that I had done it. Softly we wrapped her in a sheet, took her to the town square, and our neighbors and friends helped us bury her. Slowly but surely everything that happened last night started to come back. I went into her room, broke down her door, told her the most horrible things, and then finally took her life. Then I placed her body in the kitchen for everyone to see, including myself. Family is everything. They take care of us when we are young and we take care of them when they are old. I practically grew up with my cousin. We played together during the day and ate together at night. While not every family is perfect, there are no doubts many people have benefited from the love and affection of their family members and been hurt by them as well. That's how it is in my town. Family can heal you and family can hurt you. The only difference is, it's completely predictable when each of those things will happen. The town of Maple Haven was founded around an unending water source, a spring water fountain from the ground that hasn't stopped flowing for the last 170 years since it was found. Pure and clean, it provided enough sustenance to grow crops and keep people healthy. The 5 founding families that discovered it set up a camp, and now we have a semi-modern town to live in. It's an unassuming place, with the only difference between this town and others being that we don't let visitors stay past the sunset. We have our reasons. Once the sun sets in our town, the flowing spring water goes from clear to muddy, and then things get strange. Last night my family and I, like the other families in our town, locked ourselves in our rooms and barricaded the doors. We slowly waited for it to happen. You see, there are monsters in our town. However, unlike traditional folklore, these monsters don't come from outside. They come from our own homes. Every night, as the water turns brown, the air turns ice cold. The wind picks up and you hear the crying from every house as people wait to see who will transition. It's always one of us. We can't predict who will transition. All we know is that it will happen to one person in every family. I slowly started to forget who I was, who my family was, and as the tears fell from my eyes, I stood up and opened the door. Yesterday my cousin and I did chores together. We sat and told each other jokes together, and we spoke about what we would do if we ever got to leave the town. Unfortunately, we knew that wasn't a possibility. Everyone who leaves always wakes up back here. Last night I broke into her room, screamed at her about her shortcomings and failures, and then took her life. I remembered her begging me not to do it. I remembered her trying to talk some sense into me. I remembered the entire event perfectly. As the sun rose, I was myself again. Last night was unfortunate. No one had died in our town for so long because we learned how to protect ourselves from our families, but she couldn't protect herself from me. In my town we are the monsters, one of us every night, completely at random. We turn into monsters and hunt down our family members. We still don't know why it happens, but it does. In the morning we have to go back to life as normal. As the sun sets tonight, I wonder which of my loving family members will be a monster. I hope it's not me again. Why you should not swim after eating. Chances are, you've heard the age-old advice, don't swim right after eating. But until today, I never truly understood why. My girlfriend, Hannah, and I were basking in the beauty of a perfect beach day. With the sun blazing and not a cloud in sight, we had the entire shoreline to ourselves, strangely enough, except for a distant elderly couple. After a couple of hours of swimming and soaking up the sun, I decided to fire up the portable grill and cook some hot dogs. I mean, who can resist hot dogs at the beach, right? Once we'd finished our delicious beach meal, the heat from the grill and the sun left me longing for a cool dip in the water. Sweating bullets over here, Hannah. "Want to go for a swim?" I asked, wiping my brow. She was deeply preoccupied with her book, some mystery novel about an old detective on a cold case. Without lifting her eyes from the pages, she shook her head. I made my way toward the water anyway. I couldn't stand the heat, but I never dove straight into the water. I preferred to ease myself in gradually. As I waded in, I stopped for a brief moment. For some reason, the worst part is when the water barely touches my stomach, and it is at this point I need to steel myself and just dive in. At first, the water felt chilly, but soon I got used to it and felt how refreshing and cool it was. It felt so good I decided to do something different from my usual routine. I swam out farther. You see, close to the shore, the water is clear like glass. But as it gets deeper, it turns black, and I really don't like swimming in black water. I do a few fast breaststrokes before flipping onto my back and glancing over at Hannah in the distance. She's still nose deep in her book, completely absorbed. Quite cute, I thought to myself. Suddenly, something powerful seized a grip on my legs, dragging me underwater with force. Caught off guard, I have no time to react. Frantically, I kick and flail my arms, but there's nothing to grasp onto except water. I take a quick look at what's grabbing me, and it looks like a dark tentacle. Panic overwhelms me as I fight against its strength, my attempts pointless against its relentless grip. With each passing moment, I'm dragged deeper into the lake's depths. The surface light fades away, leaving me enveloped in pitch-black darkness. The grip around my leg finally loosens, and I make a desperate attempt to swim back to the surface. However, before I can break free, the tentacle wraps around my stomach, pulling me back down into the depths. I feel how the pressure on my stomach gets intensified. It feels like it is trying to squeeze out my intestines. The pain was excruciating, and I couldn't hold it back. I involuntarily vomited, expelling everything from my stomach. A shimmering light emerges from what I assume to be the surface. Did I die? Is this what it's like? I cease my struggle and surrender, feeling prepared to let go. The grip around my stomach vanishes, and something seizes hold of my arm. Barely conscious, I realize that I'm being pulled up onto a small boat. The elderly man shines a flashlight in my eyes and asks if I can speak. With what little strength I have left, I manage to let out a feeble thank you, my voice barely audible above the lapping waves. The old man asks if I had just eaten before swimming. I nodded my head in confusion, and he let out a sigh before saying, "Don't swim after eating. There are creatures in the depths that can sense it." I didn't mention this to Hannah. How could I? She would think I am crazy, but I believe the old man. I will just keep an eye on her to not repeat the same mistake I did. I hope you believe me and won't take any chances. Do not swim after you have eaten. I quit painting years ago. Now I know why. Recently, I tried to get back into painting. I've drawn all my life, in a sketchbook here and a notebook doodle there, but never anything too serious. Until around high school I was tired of the white and gray of graphite and wanted to move to color paint. I painted a few amateur works, but eventually, like all things, life got in the way and I held up my apron and brushes. However, recently I've been in a transitional period of my life and have had more time than I know what to do with. I had been pacing around my room one day, trying to solve what I would do for the entire rest of my life, and I noticed one of my old paintings hidden between a bookshelf and a wall. The racing thoughts began to calm and I went to rescue my old art from the crevice. I picked up the painting and blew 3 years' worth of dust off the work. Beneath was a single small boat floating in the thick mist of the empty ocean. Seeing the painting again reminded me of how much joy I had gotten from this simple activity. It was like I was able to release everything that was inside me and put it into a work that I could hold in my hands. Then when I stopped, it felt like I trapped it all inside me again. I was supposed to go out to dinner that night, but instead, I dug through the closet looking for my easel and brushes. I bought more paints and canvases and set them up on the easel in the center of my room. The blank canvas stared back at me in my chair as I contemplated what should fill it. I reached for my pencil and it began to move on its own. At first, a circle appeared, and then 2 eyes followed. I watched as a body began to emerge from the white void with the silhouette of a human. The figure's posture reminded me of Saturn devouring his sun by Francisco Goya, but with only Saturn looking directly at the viewer. With the sketch done, I began to paint. When I pushed out the first glob of black paint, I felt a feeling of lightness. It was like a gust of cold air rushed into my nose, circled my stomach, and out my mouth. My eyes widened as I loaded my brush and made my first strokes. That rush I felt intensified as I began slashing my brush in every direction, creating the background. It was a sky as black as the night with little stars. My brush moved to the center, ready to breathe life into the figure. The black paint lightened with blue began to create the star of the show. My brush cast the first stroke to create the figure when I froze. A buzzing started to fill my head as I stared into the unpainted silhouette. Sweat began to pool on my upper lip and the room turned cold. The buzzing spread from my head to my hands and they started to tremble. It felt like my head was going to explode from the pressure, like a shaken champagne bottle just ready to launch the cork. My eyes moved from my hands back to the painting and it just stared at me. The unfinished figure could see I was in pain and it just stared back at me like it didn't even care. Soon my vision began to slip until everything was as black as the painting. My eyes opened to see the carpet and my chair's legs. A crust had formed on my eyes that was wiped away by my tired hands. I didn't know if 5 minutes or 5 hours had passed or even if it was the same day. My back and joints popped as I rose from the floor to look at the clock that read a little past 3 a.m. I started to gather my surroundings and remembered my painting, but I looked at my easel and it was gone. My head turned to see the painting was finished and hanging on the wall in front of my bed, with the silhouette now completely black and with small white eyes. I didn't think it was all that strange at the time. When I awoke, I felt considerably lighter than usual, like nothing mattered besides the present moment, as well as, still very tired. I didn't bother myself with questions about how the painting got there or why I lost consciousness. I simply floated to my bed and fell into a deep sleep. The land of dreamscapes formed around me and I opened my eyes to a dark wall. My back began to feel cold and wet as I heard the occasional water drop echo in the darkness. I watched the rough and dark ceiling dance with an orange flicker. My head raised to gather my surroundings. I placed my hands on the floor and the jagged rock bit gently into my palm as I rose. The dark rock continued all around me and I understood I was in a cave. Behind me, a small fire was lit and its smoke blocked my view of the rest of the cave. I tried to look through the smoke and, where its cover was thin, I could see a figure. It was a dark figure with no discernible features except two small white eyes, like stars in the night. The figure moved toward me and the smoke blew in my face. The soot entered my eyes and they began to burn. I closed them and rubbed them hard to relieve the pain. When they opened again, I was in my bed. My bedroom came back to me, barely 20 minutes after I lay down. I began to feel a tightness in my chest when I tried to inhale. The air didn't enter my lungs. My chest didn't even move. I looked down and before me was the figure from my dream. I looked past it to see the creature in my painting was missing. The figure sat upon my chest, suffocating me. It sat about 4 feet tall and it lengthened even more so as it bent over me. Its two appendages reached down and wrapped its claws around my neck. The claws dug into my neck and I could feel the warm blood running down. I tried to push it off or even roll away, but my body was frozen. The claws deepened and its face got closer to mine. Its face was as black and as featureless as the night sky and with two eyes like stars. The figure looked at me without malice or any sense of purpose, it only reacted. Its face got closer to mine like it was an animal trying to eat me with no mouth. The thing's face met mine and it was still as featureless as before. Its face continued to get closer to mine until it went through me. All I could see was the blackness of the inside of the figure's face. It felt like I entered a void, but with pressure all around, and I went deeper and deeper and until I broke through. It felt like my head had broken the surface after being underwater. I gasped and realized I could breathe. All around was still black, but it came with a sense of comfort like I was in my own little place to hide. By now I had forgotten the figure was even there, I was just happy to feel safe. Then I felt a sting on my neck and remembered the figure. With that, whatever was below me began to suck me back down from where I came. I popped out of the thing's face and saw he was still sitting on my chest. I tried to move again, but only the tip of my right pointer finger could. I wiggled and wiggled it until the tip became a finger, then a hand, and then an arm. With that, I swung at the figure, but my arm passed right through. The thing seemed surprised and it released its grip on my neck. The pressure on my chest lightened and I could almost breathe again. Then the thing just stood up and floated toward my dark closet. It floated far enough and until I could only see its eyes and then nothing. Finally, I was able to get up and turn my lamp on. My throat felt dry and sore when I breathed in. I looked down and see the blood on my sheets. My neck started to burn and I looked up at my painting. The picture was still just that of a background and the figure in my painting was gone. I got a few bandages for my neck and then took my painting into my backyard. The sun was just rising now and I threw the painting on the grass. I grabbed a handle of vodka and poured a bit out on the painting. I lit a match and watched the fire dance above my fingers before tossing it. The painting turned into a much bigger blue flame than I expected, but watching the fire lifted my mood a bit. A feeling of catharsis came over me watching the canvas burn. As the light of the fire died out, it was replaced by the glow of the morning sunrise. I looked back up to the sun and felt for the first time like I had countless opportunities to seize that day. That there was no limit to what I could accomplish. The only thing I didn't want to do was paint anymore. The real reason for electricity. 50% and you plug it in. 100% gives that feeling of comfort. That phone, that tablet, that laptop, the toaster, your microwave. Why keep the last one plugged in? Because you like the little digital clock on it, the kind found on a $5 watch that uses way less power and takes up like 20 times less space. I used to be an environmentalist. I don't know anymore. I certainly don't act like it. Everything in my house is plugged in. I have 3 microwaves in the kitchen. Because I know the real reason for electricity. It's the same as fire, and not what you're thinking. I know because of what happened in 1999. We were students at the Joseph Avery College in Bridal Veil Lake, living in the student slum off campus. Our landlord was pissed off with us because we refused to stop throwing parties that were, admittedly, kind of wrecking the house. He wanted us out after Christmas, but we refused. So he stopped paying the hydro bill and we were soon in the dark. Calling the utilities company would have been the best decision. There are rules against a landlord taking away services considered vital. What we ended up doing, however, was reveling in being closer to a state of nature. Another party to celebrate the dark was held, and we all got very drunk. The house suffered, and we thought it was funny. Maybe we deserved what happened. After the party, the darkness and the cold weren't as much fun. We had candles and discussed building a fire pit right in the house since there was no fireplace, but Alec pointed out, wisely, that we'd suffocate without a chimney or exhaust of some kind. Using matches and scented candles became tedious and dangerous. Alec also warned us against falling asleep with a lit fire nearby. I guess he was the smartest one. We began living with the dark, stumbling around in the mess we never cleaned up and staying on campus as much as possible. A few of the guys had girlfriends and convinced them to let them move into their places temporarily. That left 4 of us, single losers, to freeze in the dark: Alec, myself, Dan, and Arthur. All of us, except maybe Alec, were best described as sidekicks to one of the guys who moved in with the girlfriends. Alec was the exception. He wasn't a leader either, more a lone wolf who kept to himself except when a house matter concerning him came up or the party was already rolling. The man enjoyed drinking. With everyone gone, he became our leader by default, a role he did not desire in the slightest. "We just have to make it till spring," he said. "Remember to shower." He went to his room. Months went by. Batteries for flashlights ran out, and so too our stash of lifted matchbooks from the hotels around Tur Hill. By then, we had changed, not for the better, but neither worse, I would say. Just different. We'd gotten used to traversing the dark and made sure to do certain chores like cleaning and homework during the day. At night, it became customary for us to gather in the living room and talk. We couldn't see each other, but it was comforting to hear their news of the day and joke around. If we had some money, we'd order in pizza and try to guess what kind we were eating by taste alone. Before the last night in that house, this story would have been a funny anecdote in a different form, a fond memory spoken of in a few sentences, instead of what it is, what I'm writing now, after all these years of trying to forget. We sat on the couches, huddled beneath threadbare blankets and wearing all of our clothes. A winter storm actively pounded the house and city outside, the only really significant storm we'd had, and it came in late March. As we discussed upcoming exams and whether or not the snow could be used to insulate the house, we heard a noise, a knocking, in the basement. It was a rhythmic, intentional, like a Morse code hitting the ceiling below. I could feel it in my shivering feet. "What the hell is that?" Alec asked us all. No one knew, so no one answered. The basement wasn't finished. Just a dusty concrete floor and framing had been done for the owner to update or not at their convenience. Our landlord had mentioned adding rooms, but without a fire exit, kitchen, or bathroom, it'd be illegal. The knocking continued. "Think it's an intruder?" Dan asked, the question directed to Alec, our leader. There was a window into the basement. Alec sighed. He'd been drinking. We all had. Why don't you find out? It was a joke, but nobody laughed. In the dark, senses are heightened. No matter how familiar or inebriated, you're always on edge. I heard Dan stand up. Fine, he snapped. He stomped his feet from the living room, and we heard him on the creaky basement stairs after feeling the sudden draft from the door we rarely opened. Fresh air wafted in. Maybe that window had been busted open. Maybe the basement was just cold. For a long time, we sat in silence, listening to the knock and hearing nothing from Dan. I call his beer if he's dead, Arthur said, failing to cover the fear with his lame-ass joke. What the hell is he doing down there? I asked. Shut up, listen. Alex stood up and stepped lightly to the adjoining hallway, just outside the threshold of the living room. I knew because of a familiar pop in the hardwood, the one that said the stairs to the second floor were within reach, and the basement was ahead before the kitchen. I'm sure I heard something, faint whispers or a soft clicking of a tongue coming from the hallway. Dan? Alec asked. All hell broke loose. Somebody roared with every fiber of their body, the noise prolonged amidst a collision of bodies culminating in a steady thud against flesh. Bones popped, and Alec groaned. What the fuck? I asked. The noise of the attack continued, subtle with squishing into tendered meat. I stood up. Arthur? Arthur? He wouldn't answer. The attack stopped, and I either felt hostile eyes upon me or reacted as if they were. The unconscious mind will always err on the side of caution. If danger is possible, best to run. Even if you're wrong, you're still alive. The other option is to fight. I should have fought. Nobody helped Alec. The first creak on the floor made me drop and crawl, squeeze, under the couch by the window. It was a poor hiding spot. Only the darkness made it viable. Hopefully, whoever had come didn't bring a flashlight. My guess is they hadn't been so prepared. Probably, a thief had seen a darkened house in a storm and assumed no one was home. They broke in the basement, killed Dan, and now killed Alec. Arthur had split already. I might survive if I didn't cross the thief. But why kill someone you definitely couldn't see? How did they know where Alec had been in the hall? Sweat soaked through my clothes and turned cold. I started to shiver and clench my teeth so they wouldn't chatter. For a long time, a very soft smacking was all that could be heard, followed by what may have been someone swallowing. A footstep on the floor by the coffee table triggered the duck sound below, a flex and a weakened point in the metal. The knocking had stopped. Had that been the thief too? In that case, they wanted to confront the residents before robbing the place. Knocking had been a lure. Only a psychopath would do that. I felt worse and worse. The invader was searching for targets. That's why they killed Alec. Was Alec dead? Was Dan? Too many stupid questions. Fight or flight? Run or stay like a coward beneath the couch, hoping to survive? It was so quiet. I allowed small, controlled breaths only. Another footstep followed, padding softly until a tap at the end like the killer went barefoot and had long toenails. The stench that hit me supported the idea of the invader neglecting his foot hygiene. It was worse than shit, though shit figured greatly in the odor's composition. There was rot and death, a hint of soil, and wet fur. I drank too much. My gut revolted and I started gagging as vomit filled my mouth. Not enough space under the couch to roll over. I turned my head, and the bile spilled onto my cheek and neck. I started choking. I pressed the couch and pushed it off my torso so I could twist and clear my throat. The springs or wires or whatever the hell holds a couch together whined with a new weight, pinning my shins. The invader had stepped onto the couch. They made a sound like licking. They were licking their lips. The slightest gust crossed my nose. A hand swatted the darkness, searching for the next kill. Foul, hot breath filled the narrow space between the back of the couch and the wall. They were close, mere inches away, somehow poised above, savoring the moment of intense fear gradually withering to acceptance. There was nothing I could do. "I know you're there," said a quiet voice. I shut my eyes tight and thought I died when I heard a loud beep from the kitchen. The pressure on the couch relented, and the invader departed leisurely. I heard it going back downstairs. The hydro had come back on. We'd left so many switches in the on position. When I opened my eyes, I saw Arthur under the couch opposite. His eyes were wide open, and he had voided his bowels during the ordeal. I thought he might be dead, but saw his chest rise and fall. What followed felt like the worst kind of awakening. Illuminated, heated, the house seemed noisy and alien. We didn't live there anymore. It had been too long in the dark. Streaks of blood led to the open front door, turning to heavy, red droplets on the snowed-in porch, filling the plunging footsteps Alec had left behind. The trail went across the street to a covered pile about the size of his body. "Arthur," I remember saying a lot. Then we called the police and I sat back down. Firefighters extracted us from the house and brought us to the hospital. I slept a lot there, which surprised me. I thought I'd never sleep again. Each time I awoke, however, it was in panic and terror. I told my story about 1,000,000 times to different people, including my parents whose arrival seemed magical. I don't remember when they got to the hospital. A cougar broke into the house, son, my dad, in the presence of a constable, said. The story, according to some detective, I suppose, was that the starving cougar had entered through the basement window. Dan had been found at the bottom of the stairs, dead from a fall. His death had almost nothing to do with the animal. He'd slipped in the dark and hit his head. The cougar, for some reason, had missed his body and came upstairs, where it attacked Alec, pulling his arm off. Since the limb wasn't found, like the cougar itself, it was assumed to be eaten, bone and all. Alec had been found under the snow, where I thought. He was trying to get help from the neighbors, but died of blood loss on their lawn, buried by the storm. When the hydro came on, the cougar fled back through the window it had come through. The landlord had apparently paid the bill prior to the storm, worried he'd be liable if we died. Everything had turned on when it did by chance. There are a number of problems with this convenient explanation, which I'm sure anyone reading this can notice. I'll list a few of the major inconsistencies. No tracks or prints from the cougar were found in or outside the house. Snow, apparently, filled the exterior ones. A shrug is the explanation for the lack inside, it just didn't leave a single one on the hardwood. Seems, at best, unlikely. Second, cougars this far south in Ontario are unheard of. While there have been sightings, few have ever been confirmed. I could only find one news story about a cougar entering a home, and that wasn't in this province. Moreover, the cougar that supposedly attacked us hasn't been seen or tracked since. The obvious place to look would be the Western Gorge in Bridalveil Lake. To my knowledge, nobody has bothered to search. The biggest, but by no means the last problem with the cougar explanation is what I know I heard the invader say. I know you're there. It hadn't been Arthur. He can't remember much. Like me, he never really recovered, but he's adamant he never said a word, though he didn't hear anyone either. Why would I say something like that? He quite reasonably asked the one time we were interviewed together. It wasn't his voice. I know. It was a voice, however, and cougars don't talk. A hungry predator wouldn't bypass an easy meal, Dan, and wouldn't flee because some lights came on. I know better. Arthur does too. We gave each other generators for Christmas and piles of batteries on our birthdays. It's not the light it fears. It's the order, it's the warmth of civilization granted by electricity and fire. The way we're attracted to a lit hearth and turn on music to disturb the silence repels it. You turn off your lights and make your house quiet for a night. Nothing wrong with that. But there's a reason you have trouble sleeping with all the power out. You just might not realize what it is yet. A cell phone I found belongs to a serial killer. I think he wanted me to find it. I'm a pretty solitary person. I like my alone time. The very definition of an introvert. I took out extra student loans in college to afford a solo dorm room. That's how serious I am about it. In order to escape humanity, I have several secluded, quiet places I like to visit throughout the week, just to get a breath of air. They're my secret hideouts where I recharge. A hidden glade in the woods by my apartment, an abandoned path at the end of my block leading to a lookout above the freeway, the roof of my complex only accessible by fire escape. Nobody ever goes to any of these places but me. They're mine, and when I'm there, I feel safe, set apart from the world. So when I found an iPhone placed conspicuously where I usually sit in the glade, I became pretty upset. It was a mild summer afternoon, the perfect weather to spend an hour in my woodsy retreat. But my sucker was spoiled when my eyes fell upon the device. Who has been in my space? I scanned the vicinity for movement, as if the owner of the cell phone might still be around. Perhaps it had slipped from their pocket and they'd be trekking back to find it any moment. But a feeling in the pit of my stomach told me that wasn't the case. The phone sat there too perfectly, resting on a boulder in the middle of the clearing, as if it had been intentionally placed there. I didn't think twice about picking it up and looking through it. I knew I should have ignored it, left the area, kept my nose in my own business. But, well, you see, I've got a little problem with that. I'm a bit of a voyeur. I like to snoop. Most of my quiet places are selected for their vantage. I take binoculars and spy on people. It gives me a sense of power. I know, it's messed up. But totally, completely harmless. Whose curiosity doesn't get the better of them from time to time? To my surprise, the phone was unlocked. I swiped up on the screen and saw the collection of apps, web browser, camera, notes. Curiously, there weren't any social media apps, no dating apps, nothing that wasn't already loaded onto a phone out the box. Like it was brand new. My interest piqued. I opened the camera first and saw hundreds of photos organized into several different albums. I went to the first and flipped through them. They were all one woman, dark hair, green eyes, pretty in a mousy sort of way. But in none of them was she posing for the camera. In each, it seemed like she had no idea someone was snapping shots of her. There were pics of her at an art museum, walking down the sidewalk, eating at a local taco joint. I gasped when I got to the final shots. There were dozens of them, all of her sleeping soundly in her bed. What sort of creep takes so many shots of a person sleeping? I checked out the other photo albums to find each was a repetition of the same pattern. A girl going about her day, then sleeping in her bedroom alone. But she wasn't really alone, was she? With trembling hands, I closed the photo app and opened Notes. I don't know what I expected. Perhaps I hoped there would be some reasonable explanation for the pictures I'd seen, an artist's statement about a postmodern photo project. Surveillance in the modern era or something. Instead, there were detailed descriptions of 5 different murders. It was like reading a police report, but with extra commentary. The author of the notes would list all the places he stuck his knife, but then also how delightful the resulting screams had been. He timed each killing, from the moment of the first stab to the second he witnessed the life fade from their eyes. A shiver ran the length of my spine. Gooseflesh broke out across my forearms. What was I reading? This couldn't be real, could it? It had to be some sort of depraved, elaborate prank. Right? Against my better judgment, I took the phone home with me. That night, I conducted my investigation. Sure enough, each woman in the phone corresponded to a missing persons case. I was able to match each face to a picture posted on local news sites. In all 5, the body was never found. No evidence of foul play, suicide not ruled out. Could I really be in possession of a serial killer's phone? That question gave rise to a more disturbing follow-up. How had this person been so careless with such damning evidence? I should have reported it as soon as I pieced together what I had. I should have turned the phone over to authorities so that they might use it to find the sick person who owned it. But as days passed, I wrestled with the decision. I couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't been careless, that the lost phone wasn't really all that lost. Which meant 2 things. First, that the presumed killer probably covered their tracks pretty damn well. Even if I handed over this phone to police, it seemed unlikely to me it would lead to an arrest. Or worse, they would make an arrest, but it would be my wrists they slapped the cuffs on. Because I could find no personal identifying information anywhere on the phone. It seemed to be a prepay with no accounts logged in. A perfect burner. In lieu of any better suspects, the cops would logically turn their eye to me. The second thing was that I was meant to find it. That the killer wanted me to have this phone and knew just where to put it so that I would find it and no one else would. That possibility occupied my thoughts for days as I struggled to ascertain the reason. Why share this information? Why share it with me? What had I done to merit their trust? Then it rang. An unknown caller ID flashed on the screen as I lay in bed reading. I froze, staring at the phone until the call went to voicemail. Then I stared for another half hour, waiting for the notification a voicemail was left. But the caller chose not to leave one. Was it the killer trying to contact me? Verify that I put two and two together? Did they know I had the phone still? Were they watching me? The call happened again the next night, and the next night after that. For 5 days in a row, I watched in horrified silence as unknown blared on the screen, each time too petrified to answer. I didn't know what to do. Should I have picked up? Told the person they were evil, that they should stop what they were doing? That would make me crazier than they were. Last night, instead of calling, they sent a text. It read, "I know you're seeing this." A second text came 5 minutes after the first. It contained a picture of a blonde sipping her latte at the coffee shop just down the street from my apartment complex. I shut the phone off, but I haven't gotten rid of it. Right now, it sits at the bottom of my sock drawer like a terrible secret. And every waking moment, I think about responding.